Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to those who are in person for today's All Things New study. And thank you to those who are joining online, either with the live stream or watching us later on recorded. Just a reminder that those of you who are joining us online, feel free to make comments in response to questions or reflections in the comment section, and we'll be able to respond to your reflection as we go along during the live cast. All right, so before we begin, by the way, for those online, I'm Pastor Rob Johnson. I serve as pastor for St. Luke's Lutheran Church in North Baltimore, Ohio, and St. John's Lutheran Church in Macomb, Ohio. So we're grateful that you are able to join us for this conversation. If you are online and you don't already know, if you go to St. Luke's Lutheran Church or St. Luke's North Baltimore website, you'll be able to download the Bible study guide for this series, and we are on lesson 5, correct? Is that right?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, this year is going by fast. All right, before we begin, we always invite people to share the names of people or situations going on in the community to lift up in prayer. So any people we should lift up in prayer this evening?
Sherry.
Okay.
Bev
Chris.
Hartman's family.
I'm sorry?
Bev Hartman's family.
Bev Hartman's family.
Her mother-in-law passed away. I don't know what's her new name? All I know is Hartman.
Chris.
Okay, anyone else? For
Bob.
any situation? Go ahead.
Bob, Sue's dad, in the hospital.
Okay.
Lots of people with breathing problems, according to my EMS chief.
Okay.
Lots and lots of breathing from the weather. Well, not breathing from the weather. Difficulty breathing from the weather.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've noticed my sinuses are going into overdrive here. Any other? If there's anyone online who'd like to lift up any persons or people for prayer. Today I was in a conference call with our area pastors. We're located near Findlay, Ohio, so Findlay area pastors to give reference. And one of the Findlay churches during Holy Week will be their chimes, their bells, their neighborhood, the bells that ring, is on a computerized system, and someone in their church discovered that the company that they use to send different songs by the bells in their church has a collection of Ukrainian national songs. And so during I can't remember the date, but during Holy Week, they're going to play those songs and offer community prayer for the people of Ukraine. So a great reminder of different ways that we can pray, not just by words and certain lines, but also by song. So we just as a way to it reminded me that to continue to pray for the people of the Ukraine. Any other prayers to lift up? All right, during the prayer, I will lift up separate petitions. For those of you online who may not be aware, a petition is just kind of us 2 or 3 sentences of a particular grouping of or subject in prayer. We've been reminding ourselves this Lenten season that Martin Luther gave the advice that every time we wash our face, that we should remember that we are baptized. So I will say a statement after each petition that reminds us of Martin Luther's saying, when we wash our face, and I will encourage everyone to respond, "I am baptized." Let us pray. Good and gracious God, we thank you for this opportunity to study your word, to discuss your vision and dreams through the scripture of Revelation. We thank you, God, for the wisdom of John, who had the dreams and visions. We thank you for the churches to whom he wrote years ago, a reminder that struggles that Christians and all people faced 2,000 years ago are very similar to struggles that we face today. We ask, God, that you pour your guidance upon us through your Spirit. We are reminded, Lord God, that when we wash our faces, we should say, "I am baptized." Lord God, we thank you for Bob and for Chris and for Sherry. We thank you, God, for their lives and the people who love them and care for them. We ask, God, that you pour your spirit of peace and healing upon all three. And we thank you, God, that you offer us and our families opportunities for a healing touch, words of wisdom and strength through the people that care for us. Lord God, bless Bob, Chris, and Sherry. Enable them to find peace and consolation in the midst of their struggles. Lord God, you remind us that when we wash our faces, we should remember and say, "I am baptized." Lord God, we thank you for our medical professionals, especially our first responders. We thank you especially for EMS and EMTs, for doctors and nurses in emergency centers. We thank you for their wisdom. We thank you for their knowledge. We thank you for their willingness to address critical need at critical moments in people's lives. Lord God, we especially lift up the people this spring and this time of year who are struggling with breathing troubles, whether it is sinus infections or asthma, complications from COVID-19, other situations where people struggle with breathing. And we ask, God, that you pour your spirit of grace and strength and peace upon EMS workers and EMTs. We thank you, God, for their specialization and their skills in treating people with all kinds of emergency situations. Lord God, bless them, and as we are reminded that when we wash our faces, we should say, "I am baptized." Lord God, we ask for blessings and peace for the family of Bev Hartman as they mourn the death of their family member. Lord, we continue to be reassured through this book of Revelation that your destiny for us is resurrection, a new life, that all things are made new, that even in the passage of death, all things, our bodies, our spirits, our souls, will become something new. And we thank you, God, that you've given to us Bev's family, and enable them to find your peace and consolation, knowing that new life will emerge in this life, but as well as the life to come. Lord God, every time we wash our face, you remind us then we should say, "I am baptized." Lord God, we thank you, God, for churches and people of faith who continue to offer prayer, to offer assistance, to even offer places to stay for refugees of the people of Ukraine. We ask, God, that you continue to make the church a frontline response to refugees, not only in the Ukraine, but in other places in the world. and that we might see, even in our own communities, people who are cut off, or people who have felt that they have been pushed away or pushed out, that the church and the people of faith might respond to their needs. Lord God, we ask for peace between Russia and the Ukraine and all places where there's war and violence that create refugees, and enable us to have a forgiving and a compassionate heart to those who struggle with eviction. Lord God, you remind us when we wash our faces, we should say, I am baptized. All these things we lift up and pray for those people and places that are near and dear to our hearts and our minds. Lord God, we lift up in prayer. Let the people of God say, Amen.
Amen.
All right, so we do have here an agenda sheet. Those of you who are online, just kind of go along and know that we will have questions where we will involve you and encourage you to respond as well. So just a review from last week and the homework assignment here for this week. Reminder that the book of Revelation are filled with visions, extensions of dreams, and signs of really God's work in the world. And so one of the fun facts that we shared from last week is that the beasts in the book of Revelation are symbols for Roman leaders. So, John's vision and visions included many visions of what the churches were wrestling with in terms of political and economic power, and the expansion of the Christian church during their time under the Roman rule. So sometimes people will take those visions and apply them to today. I know that when I was growing up, when Russia was the Soviet Union, and now even today, as Russia does things that cause anxiety and fear throughout the world, that it's easy to apply some of that analogy of the beasts in the book of Revelation and say, oh, that's talking about today. I take the position that it's a good metaphor. Those images are good metaphors, but they're not necessarily predicting anything other than we can say, oh, it looks like these people or this government is acting like the beasts described in the book of Revelation. So some people say it's predictive, but from my standpoint, John was only looking at how those 7 churches were responding to the situation around them. One of the big takeaways, and it was great to hear such great insight last week, but someone kind of caught it, and it was kind of the summary point. The book of Revelation invites each of us to see a new heaven and a new earth now. That God's working a new heaven and a new earth now. We're not waiting until Jesus returned to see signs that something new is happening. We can see those terms now. And someone very precisely, very acutely observed that when John wrote in about the vision, that when he said, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, that was an invitation to the churches then, and it's an invitation for us now to see newness now and today. And that we can take, many of us took pictures last week and shared pictures of where we see signs of God's newness emerging, even if it's something that we've seen kind of before, maybe like the flowers. That's a sign for us that God is on the path with our lives, making something new in our lives. And the word that I saw, new heaven and new earth, is an invitation for us to say, I'm seeing new things emerging. I'm seeing new life emerging. Even in the midst of all of the anxiety and the stress and the worries of the world, there's still something new to remind us that Jesus is on his way, and ultimately our future is bound by resurrection and new life. It was just a great conversation, I thought, last week. And thank you to all of you who made that contribution. Just so that we, in the course of conversation last week, and then what we're anticipating to talk about this week, any other questions or any insights from last week's conversation that you've been thinking about? So, and if some of you who had joined us last week might have a reflection or a question from last week's conversation. So, again, for me personally, I was just really glad that the keen observation that the I saw heaven and earth was an invitation, not just something about last week. All right, for those of you in person, and my apologies to those who are watching online that don't have this, just handed out another sheet, and at the top it says Common Symbolism in Revelation, and it's just kind of a list of different types of symbols that are found in the book of Revelation. Some of which we've read in our study already, and some of which maybe we've heard or read about before. This is we're not going to go through all of this. It's just a kind of a helpful sheet for you if you want it. The fun fact for this week is that the numbers 3, 4, 7, and 12 are important biblical numbers. They are frequently found throughout the Bible, not just in the book of Revelation. Obviously, you have this information in front of you, but what is what are some images, or why might the number 3 have importance in the Bible altogether? Where might we see the
Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Yeah, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Mm-hmm.
On the third day.
On the third day, he rose. Yep.
3 wise men.
The 3 wise men. Very good.
Oh, great.
Yep. So all of these have significance, and so the number 4. What are some things in the number 4 that you might remember from Scripture, or might have significance? This one's a little more tricky because we often think in 3s, but I bet if you gave it a little bit of thought, you might see where 4
and 3 equals 7, which is the number of perfection.
Yep, 4 and 3 are 7, number of perfection. Very good. Mm-hmm.
I think of 4 seasons.
4 seasons, right?
The 4 tops.
The 4 tops. Who knew that the 4 tops, Motown, is going to be so biblically integral? Yep.
Hey, well,
Yep.
Those
Earth.
things happen for a reason.
Earth,
Water,
water, air,
wind.
and wind. Mm-hmm. North, south, east, west.
Oh,
Yep. We find that the number 4 usually representing something in nature, but not exclusively. The 4 tops being predicted in the Bible. Yep. Number 7 is a significant number because it's a summary, and we already had someone know that that's the number of perfection. Anywhere else where we might have seen or read on the number 7, that might be
7 days
of creation.
7 days of creation. Very good. Yep.
7 days in a week.
7 days in a week. Yep. Yep. Very good.
Well, no, they have the 7 hills of Rome.
The 7 hills of Rome. Now, normally 7 is a number of perfection, and what Janet here is identifying is that there's this one verse here where there are seven hills of Rome. You might read in Revelation there are 7 heads on many of the beasts.
Oh, and 7 lampstands.
And the 7 lampstands. So perfection isn't necessarily morally good or bad, 7 is just a perfect number. And of course, there's one number related to imperfection that we tend to look at, say, as the sign of the devil or a sign of the beast. 666. Yep. There's nothing wrong, by the way, with the number 666. It is simply a symbol of imperfection or something less than. If you remember the maybe the story of Lucifer, or the story of it's a legend. It's not necessarily a biblical, because it's kind of different verses or different stories put together. But Lucifer, or Satan, is a fallen angel in legend, and so that meant that Lucifer, or Satan, was kind of one step kind of below the heavenly host, and so one less, or one step down. So that's where that 666 imagery comes in. If you ever get 666 of something, don't worry. It's not a sign of bad things. It's just a number. But the references.
Isn't that Nero's name in numerology?
I believe that's true. Yes.
And wasn't Nero all part of?
Somewhere in there.
Roman, yeah,
Yes.
right, yes.
Somewhere in there.
I think he fiddled a Ballroom bird.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep. Janet's pointing out that some people have said that Nero, the numerology of Greek, of the Roman letters for the Emperor Nero, was 666. Nero doesn't exactly match up to the time. Nero's reign doesn't exactly match up to the time here, but it's that idea that because there were plenty of other Roman rulers who did not appreciate Christian expansion. So, and Roman
Where are
or
they?
Jewish rebellion as well. So. All right. The number 12. Where might we find the number 12 significant in the Bible?
12 months.
12 apostles.
12 tribes.
12 tribes of Israel.
12 months.
12 months a year.
12 months in the year. Yep.
12 months.
12, yeah. And again, rooted in 3 and 4, 3 times 4 is 12. So there's all of these are part of the perfection. Yep. Very good. So I will note something. If you look here, scarlet is perverse luxury, and blue is like a royal color. And I'm just saying, those of you who are scarlet and gray versus maize and blue, pay attention to that.
No, this doesn't say blue. It says purple.
Yeah, it's purple.
That's
can't
different
read.
than maize and blue.
So
I don't know.
It's OHIO.
it's blue like the sky, blue like the water, not scarlet.
Tigers, 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 orange and black, or Elmwood, blue and white.
Anyway, to have a look at this, this is just kind of a brief little guide there.
Black, red, and black.
Red and black.
Red and black.
Sorry, I was.
Is
went
your
off.
orange and black.
Do theologians just decide what constitutes what in symbolism, or how does that come about?
Great question. The question is, do theologians come up with these ideas? The theologians that I rely on archaeologists, biblical scholars, people who've examined, not theologians, but people who look at all the available archaeological and ancient literature available. So, and I don't have specifics, and I don't want to sound like I'm making this up, but people like, for instance, with animal, they've looked at what other ancient cultures, ancient societies, how they translated, say, the lamb or whatever, and recognized that there were maybe some common conversation going on. So because these are really secular identifications. There's nothing in the Bible that says a leopard means this or an eagle means that. But ancient peoples, we kind of forget that the people, especially in ancient Judaism, so Old Testament, we read these words Edomites and Amalekites and so forth. They all had a version of God that was very similar to the ancient Hebrews, and so there were some common ways of describing the world that were within all of them, even though they had little differences. So for example, it would be like, and this is a very off the top of the head analogy, but like how people in the South might explain home cooking relative to how people in the north of the United States would explain home cooking. There are similarities, but enough differences that would make a distinction between northern cooking and southern cooking, because everybody's heritage came from England, Ireland, Germany, and those places, and then they just, as the country kind of settled, the language of food had all these variations to it, if that makes any kind of sense. Sure. So we all have something about home cooking, and we all know what mashed potatoes are and what that means, but how a southerner might talk about that and versus a northerner might be just a little different based on those experiences.
Grits and
Yep.
okra.
Yep. We've all, I think all of us have had okra, all of us have had grits, but grits in the north mean something a little bit different than grits in the south, but we all understand where the place is.
How you say it, grits or grits.
So, and maybe, and that's not a perfect analogy, but it's good enough. Yeah. So I haven't read the Bible and said, oh, this is what tigers mean or whatever. I've looked at archaeology and other resources that have that better sense.
Well, and wasn't everybody very well versed in numerology if you think about the Magi, isn't that how they sort of figured out where Jesus was?
Yep, one of them.
The
one of
stars
the ways.
and but numerology was one of the things
Yep.
that they studied. So that's always, it's like the 40 years in the desert. Doesn't necessarily mean they were really 40 years in the desert. It just meant it was a very long time they were in the desert.
Yep. Yep. So Janet makes actually a very good point, that 40 years in the desert wasn't necessarily 40 years, though 40 is an important number. Because where else would we find 40? There was 40 years in the desert. Does anyone else?
They missed seeing the baby then.
That's right. Yeah.
40 days, 40 nights.
40 days, Noah's 40 days and 40 nights.
Jesus was in the wilderness.
Jesus is in the wilderness 40 days. It's church tradition that kind of made these numbers rigid and said, well, we've got 40 days of Lent in order to prepare for Easter. But in all honesty, the 40 days was just a convenient way of saying a long time. A comparison might wait just a minute, right? If you're working with pastors, wait just a minute might mean 20 minutes, right? But we use a unit of time to express kind of something that is not quite rigid. So this is important, I think, for the number 144,000. A lot of damage theologically has been done by assuming that only 144,000 people are going to be resurrected into when Jesus returns. It's a terrible way of understanding the word 144,000. If you look on this symbol sheet, you'll notice that the number is 10,000, 10, the number 1,000, the number 12. All of those are important numbers, and that 144,000 was simply 12 times 12 times 1,000. That's it. A lot of people over a lot of different places are going to be resurrected. So, any other thoughts or reflections? Very good observations going on here.
Well, how many times you're supposed to forgive people? 70 times 7.
70 times 7, another number, another two numbers here that are important, 10 and 7.
Which means a lot, but boy, it's hard. You have to forgive people a lot of times.
It's the old, isn't it?
For those who might not hear, it's a reflection that forgiving 70 times 7 is just a lot of times, and it's hard. It's difficult. It's why Jesus said it to Peter. You know, how many times should I forgive? Not 7 times, 7 times 70. As often as you need to forgive.
I get a little wrapped up in that though, and thinking about toxic relationships and times when forgiving can get you into some, which has nothing to do with revelation.
Right.
It just is something that twists me up sometimes thinking about that.
Yep. The observation here is sometimes we are told to just forgive when what we should do is get out of a toxic relationship. And I'll just name it. You know, a lot of times, again, the church has been an instrument of harm in that when we've told maybe an abusive wife or abused wife or girlfriend is told to stay with your man and just forgive them. That's sometimes the best option is to let the relationship go, probably more times than we're willing to admit. So forgiveness can still happen, but the relationship should not.
Well, and then so forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean then staying
That's right.
status quo.
Correct. Making all things new.
See, we got it right back to where we needed to be.
Yep.
Look at us.
Yep. There's sometimes a relationship, the only way to make a relationship new is to end the relationship.
Isn't that cool? It's like numerology.
Yes, indeed. Which is what
Brings it right
Which goes back
around.
to your question about theologians and theology. Numerology should go back to what the orientation, what God's orientation is. And if God's orientation is forgiveness and mercy and liberation, not just forgiving emotionally or having mercy emotionally, but liberation from a relationship that is shackling and oppressive, then that's where the all things new come into play. So I'll share a very personal story. When I was very young, my mother had to make a decision about staying in an abusive relationship, and the pastor, fortunately, that she relied on at the time, said, "Do you have 2 sons, and what do you think will happen to your sons if you stay in the abusive relationship?" And so for me, that is a great example of the Spirit moving through a pastoral figure, through the church, at a time when you just don't. You didn't abandon. You stood. Marriage was forever till death do you part. And so for my mother to make that decision when all other counsel was to try to make things new within the relationship, there was one pastor who realized that, you know, if you want something different, then you're going to have to, and you're looking to the future and making sure that not just your own safety, but the health and safety of your sons, you're going to have to change radically that relationship, which is to say
That
break it
makes
off.
it difficult because when you're in a relationship like that, it's toxic.
Yes.
But you're used to that. So then to leave, then you're opening yourself to a whole new, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Very much so.
Things new, right? Yeah.
But it's gotta be better.
Yep. And the tie-in then for tonight's conversation is about risk. right? If all things new means having a radical change in how relationships and how things are, how we do things or how we approach our relationships, there is always a risk. Newness doesn't mean our anxiety is lessened. Newness doesn't necessarily mean that we think everything is going to be hunky-dory. Newness has an element of risk to it, and so that decision for my mom to start thinking differently about her relationship was an element of risk, even though it was going to lead to that liberation. There was still risk involved. I recently read an article, and I shared this with some colleagues. There was a pastor who had been reflecting on the idea of praying for the people of the Ukraine, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he said, you know, here I am sitting in the comfort of my home or in the comfort of my church here, and I am asking for change to happen and peace to happen in the Ukraine. And that might mean that there are people. A couple of weeks ago, there was a Russian news broadcast, and one of the reporters or whatever, in the middle of the broadcast, holds up a sign that says "No war, peace," and that person was arrested and probably will not see freedom for the next 15 years. And he was reflecting on it and says, my prayer of peace in the comfort of my home means that person is going to languish in a prison. And so it's not to say be careful what you pray for, it's to say recognize that any change for the better or any change that God is bringing about may mean a risk has to be taken. And John is definitely saying that to the 7 churches. The love you had for each other and for Jesus when you started was energizing and was strong, but now it's kind of fallen away, and the weight of resistance and the weight of waiting for Jesus to return is starting to pile on, and you may have to take some risks to get that energy back in order to have the newness happen in the community. So I think I've talked longer than I needed to on that, but any other reflections, any other insights there? Great insight. These have been really good conversations. All right. So the to-do was to do something creative without having a plan. Just do something, all right? So I am going to, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't myself do. So I brought my trumpet. By the way, a trumpet is a symbol in the book of Revelation. The instruction, yes, the instruction was to create something without having a plan. Just do something. Do something out of a motivation to create. Now, before I go into this, where in our lives are we most likely to create something just by creating and not worrying what the end result is? What point in our lives are we most comfortable just making it up as we go along?
As a child.
As a child, yeah. This task is meant to tap into our inner child. And if you think about children playing, they may take something they experience, maybe it's a scene from a TV show, or maybe an interaction that they've seen with adults, and they'll take their dolls or their whatever, and they may start to imitate what they've seen. But it doesn't take long for them to make up their own stories with no plot line. It's or they may take what the initial story and combine it with another story that they're, or a memory that they have, and then just put it all together, right? So, so I'm just going to play some notes, and to make sure that it is something that I haven't really practiced before or I'm not remembering, I'm going to ask our resident musicians here for our churches to just give me a note. Give me a note.
C.
C, okay. So this is a C on the trumpet. All right, is it too loud on the?
Maybe point away.
Yep, okay.
Okay.
I'll point down.
Okay.
All right. All right, first of all, did that sound like any song that you've heard to your minding? All right. All right. It didn't sound like any song.
Sound like a fifth grade band.
Sounded like a fifth grade band. I'm reaching into my childhood. Yep. It didn't, it felt, there were some notes that were shaky. There was a little bit of, like I didn't hit each note right on cue, but there were, but it was, that's not what the assignment, well, the assignment wasn't to make it perfect. It was just to play, to mess around a little bit, to take the experience that I've had in playing trumpet or music that I've had and see if I can make something. I'm not expecting it to make a top 10 hit. Anything else you observe about what I was doing there, other than sounding like a fifth grade band?
Well, you started on a C, you ended on a C.
Okay, started on a C and ended on a C. Taking some of my experience and putting it into one of the things that I mean I didn't intend to end on a C, I just wanted to end. And one of the things that I've internalized is that most songs that we know and love end on the note that they start on. Not all of them, but it's a
Well, it depends on the key. I mean, yeah.
depends on the key.
Right.
Yep. But that's one of the things I learned
You
growing
should
up.
put an amen on the end of it, and then
Right.
everything will work out perfectly if you just put an amen on the end of it.
But most songs have to have a resolution, right? And we are trained that in American culture, this is what I learned, and this is what the filter I've done, is that most often the songs, if we look at all the songs that we enjoy, they end on the note, and certainly end on the key of what they were started. The four tops generally ended on the note that they started on. Any other things you may have noticed or kind of thought about my little improvisation? Was there anything else that caught your
I think
attention?
there was a steady beat much.
I'm sorry?
There wasn't a steady beat.
Not a
much.
steady beat much. I wasn't worried about playing. I wasn't worried about a beat.
Certain rhythm.
I wasn't worried about a certain rhythm. I wasn't here to entertain you.
Well, that's the whole point. You weren't worried.
I wasn't worried about it. Mm-hmm. Yep. There was what was perceived to be chaos, but it wasn't about trying to get to the point, because I knew that it was gonna end. You may or not have thought it was going to end, but I knew that it was going to end, and we didn't worry about it. Any other insight or any other observation about what?
Well, it takes a little bit of bravery
Okay.
to do that.
Yep.
Probably more than a little.
Doesn't really have much direction.
Not much direction.
You know which way what note you're gonna play next.
No. Though, as Janet observed, there were some rules that I did pay attention to. Like I knew I was going to end on the note that I started on. I knew if we were to go back, there were probably some notes that I was comfortable playing that I just went back to, you know, as I was going along. So I went back to those notes. And you say, oh, you started on a C, but you seem to do a lot of A sharps in that, or whatever. So there was probably something going on there, right? So before we get more to connecting this to the lesson, did anyone else do something where you just kind of built the plane as you were flying it?
And we made a dessert.
Did someone make a dessert?
Yeah, they made a dessert.
Oh. So we have here, and I'll bring. Is it okay to bring it up? Okay. So we have someone here who just drew different things that came to mind. Yes, that's what you did.
Yeah, just something to do.
Yep. Right. So there's no particular order in these sets of pictures. So not necessarily trying to tell a story with a beginning, middle, and end. No ontological tension between nature or man and you know. It's just things that were just on her mind, and she just said, and probably, I don't know the order, but you might have drawn the squirrel first. Oh, that reminds me. Oh, we'll try a rabbit. You
No,
know?
I actually did the chicken first.
You did the chicken first. Yeah. Yep. And somewhere in the thought that led to the other animals, and then eventually the and just drawing. Who here likes to doodle? We got a doodler. Yeah. And sometimes we just doodle. That is a form of play, of building the plane as we're flying it. It's just a way of just kind of letting our thoughts, and we don't doodle when we're anxious. We don't doodle when we're upset. Or do you do that? Oh, you do? Ah.
I'm sitting on the phone, I'm talking on the phone, trying to figure something out to a customer or something, I sit there and do it.
Okay, but it's not it's you're just allowing yourself to think through a problem. It's not necessarily tied to an anger, right?
No.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
It
Very
helps
good.
you listen, it helps you follow along, it's,
Yep. It helps you organize the new information that you're getting, or to
Wear out a
organize.
pen,
I'm sorry.
or to wear out a pen,
There you
Yep.
write notes.
fill in the
your
corners of the paper.
Yep.
Around the notes.
Yep.
Yeah. I painted a kitty.
All right. I'll show it to.
Oh,
Okay.
my.
You painted a kitty. This is all. Oh.
Yeah, but then,
It's okay to show everybody. It's okay to show everybody your artwork.
oh yeah, okay,
Is it okay to show?
sure. Yeah.
So
But
this
here, but this is the mom and that's the baby.
is. Oh. This is great. Oh, you
If you
can.
pet it, it's more active. It's purring.
Oh, yeah, you can hear it purring.
Wow. Any teeth or
Well, you can put your fingers in its mouth.
Oh no, I'm not going to do that.
Well, I do all the time.
Yep. So so what led to this? How did you decide that this? You were just gonna.
Well, it sort of looks like one of our cats.
Okay.
It was
Yep.
supposed to look like, but it didn't turn out that way, did it?
No. That's great.
Yeah, you're right.
Eventually, though, you put it on this.
Well, that would.
That was already like that.
The
She was
cat was
painted it.
on there, and then I decided to paint our kitty.
Oh, okay. Oh, very good.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, that was we gave that to my sister, and in the nursing home, and people would go by and they thought she had a real cat in her room.
It's great. Hi. I'm gonna hand you back.
Oh, okay. Okay, better turn it on.
Anyone else do a project? Oh, very good. Is it okay to show
Yes.
everybody online? Okay.
It's a hummingbird swing.
It's a hummingbird swing. Wow.
I've seen them in general online, and I thought, well, I'm gonna make one. So I went in the yard and I got tree branches, and Mom had a whole lot of beads, and I just kind of
Put them in.
put in whatever
Fantastic.
I wanted.
Wow. There will be some very happy hummingbirds.
If the big birds don't get on it and break it,
Oh,
first, we might have
all right.
to, yeah, modify
Well,
it, but that's okay.
But that's a part. That is a part of the creativity. Is
Yeah.
that you actually don't know when you hang it how it will end up.
I'll have to take a
and-
picture back.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, anyone else?
Tracy,
Yeah,
I think it's cute.
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
And I think you really enjoy playing
What
with
you
the glue, actually.
Playing in the glue. I just started gluing tiles to
Can we show people?
yeah,
Okay.
a little flower pot.
Very good.
Oh.
Tiles to a little flower. So this will end up. A plant will end up here. Mhm. Very good.
Oh,
Yep.
I have about
Great.
50 of them, so.
are those stuck on?
And you
Yeah, I was
just
gluing them.
you just picked tiles and whatever.
Yeah, I bought tiles, and I was gonna try to make a pattern, but I got tired of searching for things, so then I just started picking tiles up and put them on.
Yep.
There you go. That was the assignment.
That
There's
was the
no
assignment.
pattern.
There you go. Yeah, no pattern. Yep.
It's just random, kinda
Kind of like you.
like my head.
Oh.
Kinda like me, random.
For some of you, I know that the way we do this Bible study is a bit like that. In that some of you may not feel like you want to share, or you're not sure about sharing. Now, the difference between when we started the study and where we are now, I think a lot more, and a lot different people share now. But at the first, there was, and you weren't quite sure exactly what I was doing and how I was leading. But a Bible study like this is all about improvisation, right? How do you think, and we are at 8 o'clock, so I don't, I do want to respect time, but I want, what might improvisation, the human capacity, if we are all created or we are all made in the likeness of God, what do you think improvisation in human creativity says about how God is moving forward to the day when Jesus will return? What do you think? Where do you think improvisation fits into making all things new?
I think he's preparing us for something different.
Okay, say more.
I don't know what else to say.
Improvise it if you.
It's going to be something that we have no
Control over.
idea what it's going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think about where my family who have passed on, where they are, you really don't know. I mean, what their life is like now. I mean, it's not a life. I mean,
Right.
it's when you think about the afterlife, it's just we don't know.
Yep.
It's just going to be better.
Yep.
Gilda Soccer says it's going to be one more surprise. Just
It's
like
one
in the
more
song
surprise. Mhm.
Morning Cry.
Yep.
It's just one more surprise. I was just thinking though, improv isn't just, for the most part, like as a musician is doing improvisation, is not just randomly doing whatever, whenever, however. There's a plan somewhat of how you, an outer boundary maybe, or a framework of where you want to go with the improvising. So I don't know. Does God have we know God knows us before we're born. We know that God has a plan for us, but the structure of that plan isn't necessarily being filled out by Him.
Yeah,
Right?
do you have an example? Of in your own life where you might?
In my own life?
Yeah, or maybe in an experience that you're aware of, where that might be exactly what you have observed, that there's this kind of structure, but there's improvisation. Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I went to the school today to listen to kids talk about their college. They made trifold boards about their college career, and I laughed. I said, Olivia never runs out of things to say. Olivia has many things to say, but these kids are all Lucy was planning her life, and and I was walking around talking to them and thinking, this is great that they have this structure and these ideas, but not one of them, I don't think,
Uh-huh.
is gonna end up doing exactly what's on that trifold board. You know, they've got that organized and but everybody's life tends to, for whatever reason, you go on a different path or you know, something
Yeah,
else.
the bumps in the road.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
On their travels.
right,
A lot of bumps in the road
Right.
on their travels.
yeah. And you can either get really upset about those bumps, which sometimes we do get upset about the bumps. They send us off on a direction we weren't necessarily expecting. But it was interesting because I only had one NFL player there today. He's, you know, planning on being an NFL player. And I'm thinking, I'm not gonna say to him, how often do you practice and are you still lifting weights every day and, you
How
know,
realistic it is.
right. I mean,
Or if,
it's not necessarily realistic,
or if
but,
you get chosen.
right, and right, how many people get chosen to be on an NFL team? Not that very many, but, you know, so it's just all, and who knows, and maybe I'm completely wrong, which is a possibility.
Any reflections off of that? Let's keep that going.
I was gonna say that, like, my nephew, they just had twins, so same genes. Yes, it's a boy and a girl, but still, if it was two girls, and if they were identical, why do they choose different? Why does their, life go different directions?
Mhm.
And it's that free will that we get into that we can make our own choices that God gave us. So
What do you think is the structure that that encourages a young person to think about the NFL? What's the structure that feeds into young people in general saying, "This is what I want to be"?
Well,
Heroism.
Go ahead.
Heroism.
Heroism, right? Okay. We see people, role models. So for football players, it's the NFL. For other types of professions, there's a role model there somewhere along the way that says, we identify with.
Isn't it usually the parents, though, that encourage them to do something?
It might be the parents who encourage them to do
But they
something.
don't listen anyway.
Right. Yeah.
they don't listen anyway.
They don't. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Lynn wasn't successful with getting his kids to go, but your kids are all very strong-willed and very
They take after me in
focused.
that regard.
Well, there you go. But they're very focused. I mean, Doris was very focused from.
Yeah.
Doris and I had a couple intense conversations about a fourth year of math.
Yeah.
I didn't win.
No. Right.
So,
What is the structure that informs or kind of moves people like your with your family there that produce the surprise or encourage the surprise when these beautiful little babies didn't turn out to be twins in what we understand twins to be? What structures at work do you think?
I'm not quite.
They expected one thing, but a different thing happened. What do you
Oh.
think is the structure that underlies the expectation?
That they would be the same.
They would be the same.
Yeah.
We hear the word twins, and that they would be the
Oh,
same.
right.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Because in all of our experience, we see twins as being the same.
Oh,
Now we know,
right,
of course,
they're
they're
not.
fraternal twins, right?
Yeah. Yeah. A boy and a girl,
But
right.
but when they heard twins,
Mm-hmm.
something different happened.
Different environments, different,
Yeah.
being at a different place at a different time causes their personalities to float.
Yep.
And it depends on how they're treated.
Yep.
It's like I read an article the other day about a woman, obviously a rich woman, had a dog that was that she loved, and she had it cloned.
Oh.
And the dog, the second dog, had a totally different personality than the original.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Identical physically, but it was a totally different
Yep.
personality.
Well.
I'm just going to share online. What he's saying is he's sharing the story of a woman who had a beloved dog and thought if she cloned that dog it would be an exact but as it turns out, the cloned dog had a different personality and totally unexpected. Yeah.
It only works that way in movies.
It only works that way in movies. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So one of the things that Revelation is trying to communicate is that that oftentimes we act on structures that are much more like human based or human oriented. So like heroes, we think of our heroes as having some sort of larger than life, something bigger than ourselves, when really they are simply role models for how we might relate to people as we get older, or simple things like, when they say, oh, it's twins. But when the babies are born, there are obvious differences that really suggest they're going to be two different personalities. We're not going to have to wrestle with the sameness. Or in the case of the cloning of the dog, what our expectations are. What are some God structures, or what are some spiritual structures that might cause us to think differently about some of the surprises in our world? What do you think is the structure that God encourages us to follow, that may have something to say about our hero worship?
Well, the Ten Commandments.
Go for it.
The Ten Commandments.
And
that's our basic guide, rules to follow.
Yep.
And like heroes, there's only one God. Don't put those football players above God.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can freedom and improvisation be a structure?
Well, what do you think? That's a great question. What do you think about that?
Well, I was sitting here just thinking that the ability to choose what we like, and God is teaching us improvisation by allowing us to have the bumps and figure out where to go next, and how we're going to deal with it, how our personality is going to handle
Goes
it,
the old
and
adamant, God won't give you any more than what you can handle.
well, life is just a lot of moments that are freedom, choices, right?
Yep. God in the 7 days story, God says to put the stars in the sky, but it didn't say that God put them in the exact place where they were supposed to be. It just said the stars are in the sky, right? And the question you raise is God really an improvisational God? Is God kind of making this stuff up as we go along? And God is also stumbling forward in the way that we are stumbling forward in our lives. Very few people would accept that, right? But is it possible?
Well, that would imply that God doesn't know everything.
Right. Or
If not that he doesn't know everything, but he doesn't
Allows it to happen.
a lot. I don't know. What does that imply?
Oh, man.
It's free will.
But
right,
Children
exactly.
of Eden. Have you seen the musical Children of Eden?
I have not, no.
It has really lots of interesting premises in it, but one of them is God is learning to be a parent, and how hard it is for him to learn to be a parent to Adam and Eve, because they misbehave and they disobey, and so he's angry and he's learning, and so you just went, because when you improvise, I have problems improvising sometimes because I get all caught up in following the structure. When I finally just relax and let it happen is when something nice comes out of it, or what it sounds nice to me, or it feels good to me. We did that at the musical. We had some fun, the drummer and I had some fun with the Willy Wonka music, and just sort of flowed out of nowhere and had a great time doing that. we didn't plan it. It just sort of happened.
Relationships are like that.
Say more.
Yeah.
Well, that's how life works sometimes. You can be so thwarted by a structure that you don't agree with, and then all of a sudden you kind of let go of that, and then things fall into place. Does that sound familiar?
It does. It does. I don't know. My mind has just been blown tonight.
Well, if you think about, this is not improvisational in the sense that I got in a drawer and found some things I had and put it together.
Yes, it is.
Okay, might be creative, but it wasn't like, I didn't just look at that and say, whatever. But like, for example, when Steve gets down and sits down on the piano and starts to play, and to me it sounds like absolutely nothing, but he is so joyful with it, because to him it doesn't have to be anything. It's just, he likes what he's doing, and so it is improvisation. It truly is improvisational,
Right.
without a plan.
Completely without a plan. Yeah.
So, and that does bring him a lot of joy. And he plays the trumpet and various other instruments, and he's never played any of those, but he likes
he
to
just
do it.
enjoys and has a good
Yeah.
time.
So,
That's
Which
awesome.
is
it's like allowing yourself to not be bound by the rules
Yeah.
or something. I don't know.
So let's split.
Glasses on and went.
Is it okay if we play around a little bit?
Don't worry.
Work on improvising.
I
Go
think
ahead.
so.
Go ahead, Blue.
Well, you would expect a king to be born in a castle
When
or
you get
someplace
new.
grand. Our king was born in a manger.
Boom,
So they wanna test them.
boom. We expected a king to be born in a castle, but the king we follow was born in a stable.
Karen, he can't get that in his pockets.
And if you think about maybe some of the sermons you've heard over the years or Bible studies, God took a risk in asking Mary if she would give birth to that king, because Mary could have said
Are you kidding me?
no, right? But fortunately, she had a vision and a dream enough that maybe something else is going on here. Now, I do want to say that we struggle with some of this, because oftentimes, like we read the birth of Jesus, and it says there, just as the prophet Isaiah said, this was going to happen. We try to connect the dots, and we try to look back and see, where there was prediction. But you might notice that you have to look back in order to look ahead. And that's where we get back to some of that first conversation we had at the very first start, that there's some sort of thread between past, present, and future. And because we have our idols and our hero worship, and we have our expectations about what we're planning, and we have somebody's doing something and we think it's just a jumble, but they're enjoying the moment, and we do something that we think is going to make us feel comfortable, and it turns out completely against what we thought, because all of those things really pile up on us. Sometimes we forget that perhaps the structure has something less to do about what we plan and more about how we improvise things like love, forgiveness, mercy, justice, peace, and how that is the structure that underlies everything.
Look at the story of Joseph of many colors.
Yep.
Go to many colors.
Go for it.
Look how his life turned.
Yep.
Down in the well, no one's gonna see him, know. And, then people come and take him in, and then, he's on the lowest edge of the hierarchy, and then he gets to be the highest. And then he meets his brothers again.
Yep.
And, and he doesn't have malice after all they did. I mean, look at his life. How unstructured was all of that?
Yep. And there's a certain vulnerability that Joseph had to have. He could have put on the armor of vengeance. He could have put on the armor of bitterness, and been more like a turtle, closed in under that. Instead, he allowed, it wasn't that he wasn't bitter or that he didn't want revenge. I mean, he was a person, so he experienced those things. But he allowed himself to be vulnerable enough to use the gifts that he was given, to and to kind of live in the moment, so that he could be open to whatever future awaited him.
It was very forgiving.
Yeah. And it's tough to be vulnerable when you're stuck in a well.
No joke.
No
There's
joke.
that story about they throw the donkey into the well and they're gonna bury him, because he's alive down the bottom of the well and want to get rid of him, and so they start shoveling dirt on top of him, and he just shakes it off and steps up.
Yep.
And eventually gets out of the well because he's made his own ramp, or however.
Yep.
That took the junk that was being dumped on him and built,
Turned it into
built
He showed
something.
him who was the ass on that one.
Well, I guess.
See, some of us improvise with music, others improvise with jokes.
I used to tell kids all the time, we'd talk about getting into trouble and what are you going to do now that you're in trouble? And I'd say, well, here are the tools. You're in a hole. What do you need? And we'd talk about the wood and the hammer and building the ladder and doing all of those things. It's just kind of taking what you're given,
And that's a life lesson.
improvising with it, and making something pretty.
That's a life lesson.
You didn't pick those
So-
colors out on purpose.
No.
Consider this, the only thing that Jesus knew in the 3 years that we have in the Bible is that at some point he's going to be arrested and crucified and raised on the third day. And one of the things that he does, very rarely, if ever, does he predict that he's going to heal someone. It's always somebody coming up to him.
Random.
He doesn't schedule it. I mean, he schedules the time to be available, to be vulnerable, but he doesn't say, well, today I'm going to meet the woman at the well, and tonight I'm going to talk with I want to say Nostradamus, but that's not his name. Nicodemus. Thank you.
Which century are we in?
Yeah, I know, right? It's all mixed up in there. I'm improvising the names.
M guy.
That's right. To be honest, I don't even think that he knew which Passover it was going to be that he was going to be handed over. But he was paying attention to a different structure than what even the disciples were. He was paying attention to the Spirit. He was paying attention to what he was getting from the authorities, from the Pharisees and the Sadducees. There were several Passovers that he spent with his disciples before the Passover that led to his crucifixion. And so we don't what I think Revelation is trying to do is to tell us the Roman political and economic structure, those are beasts that will devour you. The structure you need to pay attention to is the one where you might have to forgive when everything else tells you not to, or you might have to leave that relationship when everything else tells you not to, or you might have to do something creative when everything else tells you not to. And I think that's really kind of the broad idea that Revelation is trying to say, that any time we tap into that improvisation, that there's a real risk involved, and doing while doing the same thing or trying to achieve what the world wants us to achieve may feel comfortable, but it's not necessarily it doesn't necessarily lead to the newness that God is promising. So, and I'm not, that's just kind of a rule of thumb. I don't know what it means for different people, because there's still that kind of personal engagement that we have. So, all right, I'm going to wrap things up here because we are over time. But I'm glad that the overtime is because we've had some really good conversation and really good insight and I'm glad that you're thinking about these things and kind of looking for your own signs of newness. And so that's a good thing. Keep at it. For next week, our to-do is to adopt a small practice that cares for creation. And you'll read that in page 36 of the student guide. So that might be they offer suggestions there, but maybe you've got something in your own yard or in your own neighborhood that you could do. So that will be the to-do for next week. We have one little wrinkle in that I will be away next week. I have a separate work to do that will take me away. So I will not be leading this. Before I ask the person that I'm going to ask to lead it, is there anyone who wants to lead this? And next week is really going to be kind of a summarizing what we've done. It's not going to be, you're not going to be expected to know the book of Revelation or to be a scholar, but it's really leading a discussion for kind of wrapping up what we've talked about over the last 5 weeks. So if there's someone who's willing to take the risk, improvise a discussion, so to speak, and lead the conversation, I'll take a volunteer. If not, I know there's somebody I'm going to ask. So.
You get a lot. I can't contact her.
Yep. It's your chance to improvise. Take a risk. All right. So someone will be guiding this next week, but it won't be me specifically. And again, it will be kind of a wrap up of what we've talked about, and allowing time to talk about some newness that might have happened or occurred over the last 5 weeks that you may not have noticed had we not had these discussions together. Okay. In the student guide, there is on page for this lesson there is a prayer of risk or prayer for risk taking. Yeah, prayer of risk. And so, why don't we read that prayer together? And if you have it online, please feel free to join us where you are. Page 31 of the book, Prayer of Risk. Holy One, who has given us the breath of life, today we remember to breathe deeply, to rest, to take in, to pause before we act, and then to take in another deep breath, poised on the edge, and risk jumping in, risk taking action, risk speaking up, risk using the gifts we have been given, so that at the end of our life, we can say with absolute clarity that no part of our existence was wasted in fear of failure or fear of success. Hold us. Prepare us the way to begin to offer the gift of our awakened presence, full of love and light today. These and the prayers of our hearts we lift up now in the silence. Amen. All right, go in peace, serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Amen.